All right, so this is a new type of demo that I haven't done before, and that's after we've critiqued the project, we can go back in and make improvements and then make a resubmission. So this was the assignment 3. It's not the TIFF assignment, and if I have all of my documents really nicely organized, I'm able to see the difference. You see assignment 3. I'll usually mark my TIFFs with purple, my PSDs with green, and whatever the online file format type that I submit with is orange. So if I look at my TIFF, I'll just open it up in preview here. Remember, all the TIFF was, well, I can open it with Photoshop. The only way that the TIFF was different than the Photoshop file was that it had color processing built in. But if I take all that color processing off, it's just the same as my finished Photoshop file. See, identical. But with these color filters added on top. So to make improvements, it depends on what the critique is, of course. And the critique that I had, which I thought was a very smart critique, was that the bird is integrated well, but this foreground element here kind of pulls focus away from it, because this was the main focal point to get the viewer's eye into the landscape. But now with the bird, maybe I want to weaken this as a focal point. So to do that, I have to go back to my Photoshop file. This is why we saved them in these different types. And I can look at the layers that contribute to that. And I can play with where those layers are in the scope of things, basically, like how strong they are. And I can also bring in texture fills in a different way. So what I think I want to do is find a texture fill to put over this to kind of dampen it, maybe behind this little foreground element here. Let me isolate that layer. So many layers in these composites by the time we're done. Huh. Here it is, I think. Well, that's part of it. Strange. Let me use the auto select. See if that helps. It's probably just going to give me a texture fill layer. Yeah, sure enough. I have to go through methodically, turn them on and off, figure out which layer. Gives me that foreground object. So I know this is part of it, but anyway. We got to fit the texture fill between there. And if I need to, I can select around this foreground element. There we go. Select the inverse, duplicate it onto its own layer, pull this on top of everything. So we're looking past it into some of the other things. I'll put it just behind one texture fill. Okay, now, instead of just using the same texture fills over and over again and just placing them in different places as I have, I'm going to go back to what compositing is all about, which is an image search. And I want to look for a dust cloud. I don't need to worry too much about the size of it. I want this dust cloud to kind of come in from the corner. And maybe even add some texture since it is in the foreground. So sometimes I'll just use the size to limit the references I see, because sometimes there's just too many options. So I think this will be a good one, if it's a well-taken photograph. I love Google image searches because this isn't at all what I was looking for, but if I decided to composite with this, man, that could really put my image into some really creative territory, right? So don't be closed-minded to some of the options that you weren't expecting. Yeah, so that's plenty good resolution. Save that to the desktop. Then bring that in to my Photoshop file. On top there. Tuck it in on the side like that. Place it. Select around it. I definitely don't want this tractor in there. But I like all these soft edges. Select it around it, duplicate it, turn off the layer. This is just a good overall review of what we've done in compositing. Take a 100% soft edged eraser, make sure I'm on the right layer. Transition it. Hard edges are the easiest way to spot where a composite begins and ends. Maybe take the opacity down on the eraser a little bit. Get this dust cloud. And because it's an organic dust cloud, I should feel free to stretch it and extend it. Do what I want to do to it. Warp it. Till it feels more believable and kind of suits my purposes. Okay, so I've got that dust. Now, I don't want to just leave it like that. Let's see, let me put it on top of the other texture fills. There we go. I want to blend it in, and I can do that with opacity, right? I can play with its color. Oh, and I forgot, I wanted this on top of it. And maybe some other texture fills on top of it. This shows me some problems with some of these texture fills, though. You can see some sharp edges in there. So this is all just about knowing how to manipulate layers. And integrate them. I can also use blending modes. You see, that really changes the color. It's a lot like a color processing filter. But I don't want to change the color. I want it to actually obscure what I'm looking at. So I think I'll just keep it in normal mode. Play with its opacity. And now if I squint, that definitely draws the focus away from this and more onto this, but the color is too extreme. So now I'll do my other adjustments. Hue saturation, shift it from being quite so warm. Not so saturated, just more dusty. Then I can even play with color balance. I like a little bit of that warmth. I'll keep some of that warmth in the highlights on the cloud. Then in the shadows, I like to go a little cooler. Bring it around. So that definitely downplays this, but maybe a little too much. I'm going to take this layer and actually play with its opacity a little bit so that it sinks into the background, because what's behind it is the one behind the texture fill, because remember I made a duplicate. And now I can go in and just, with my eraser brush, at a very low opacity, very soft edged, I can cut away some of these aspects. Decide what I want to show, how I want it to show. So that makes a big difference. It's quite a bit different from when I first opened this. And you can see that texture fill, really downplays this element, which was the critique. And I'm trying to utilize the critique here to improve my project. But when I look at it with the first one, I really like how the eye trails back here and there's a lot of contrast. So I can take it down a little bit more and then maybe erase it out. Where these shadows are. So I still get that eye movement. And the funny thing about texture fills is you just spend so much time taking away. It feels like the opposite of building something, but they're incredibly important to making the atmospheric illusion work. Now I'm just looking at the different layers. I want to bring out these shadows a little bit, so I have to see which texture fill needs to be erased for that to happen. Partly this one. Yep, I want to bring out those shadows a little bit more. That will help kind of lead the eye back and not focus so much on this too. And every little bit helps. So maybe just that much. All right. I can even dodge and burn right into the texture fill. So if I feel it's too bright here, I can burn the texture fill. This is burning the dust in front, so it feels a little crisper. But again, I don't want to distract from my creature as much, and I think that's doing it. Okay, so now I've got a new PSD. I've just got another feature added in to make this work. And now what I get to do is save it as my assignment 3 PSD. And then what I get to do is go through flattening it, but not saving this as a PSD. Instead, just copying it, selecting it all, copying it, and pasting it into my TIFF on top of my old background, like that. And you'll see the difference. Very subtle, but it adds that texture fill in. Now, in order to get it to really match, so there it is, I'd want to run the actions on it again. And I can do that and then make those final adjustments. But for now, I'm going to cheat, and I'm just going to take this layer, take all my color adjustment layers, merge them together into one layer, and then just erase away from it. So that just in this area, I don't have the texture fills showing in so much. And then that's it.